the gerontology or the education journals of social work. I think that's really what brings my expertise here. I talk at the beginning of each year, I'll have a focus group of students where my job is to shut up and listen to them so that I know who they are and what's important to them. If you want to influence somebody, you want to know what's important to them. I'd like to hear from a few of you now, if I could, some of your interest in, you know, I'm sure education is going to be a big part of it, but I would like to hear some of the individuals in this meeting, what they might be interested in their life pursuits. Yes.
Hello, teachers. Anyone from the respected teachers? Dr. J has already mentioned that if anyone can, you know, speak about what kind of, you know, the topic you will be interested in writing. So can anyone share your experience?
I think Balkishan sir.
I think this will.
Yeah.
I think in general, Dr. J with it's like hoping to have some clear idea, like what exactly, you know, like we are interested on. Is that right, Dr. J?
Yes.
Okay.
You might want to start them out. You know, you talk about education, child welfare, that kind of thing. Give them an idea what I'm talking about.
Mm. Anyone would like to share something on that, the topic that you might be interested on, writing your you know, like something like any topic that you think that you are really good on that, and you think that you can really pursue someone through your writing?
Well, here for an example, I know Sophia is interested in education. She's interested in child welfare. So when I'm giving examples to her class or her people, I might put the examples in the phrasing of child welfare, perhaps, or in education. If you were to ask me, I'm interested in mental health success, student success primarily is what I look at. I'm interested in gerontology. Me and Sophia are writing an article on older individuals and technology. So does any of the participants here have a burning desire, a topic that they'd like us to use or they'd like to share with us? Okay, let's move. Go ahead.
Okay. You can proceed, Dr. J.
Okay. Can we share the screen with the PowerPoint, or should I just look at that on the side?
Please, Dr. J, can you just share?
Sophia, could you help me to adjust this room by muting all, because you are a co-host right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna. Okay, hold on. You want me to mute all?
Yeah.
Okay,
I did. I did.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't have to do anything. Okay. So yes, Dr. J, yeah, please share the screen with us.
Okay. I'm not sure I know how to do that. Do you know how to do that? Share it with us.
You want me to do that?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay. Just give me a moment.
While we're waiting on that, I can tell you that I'm pretty well spoiled. I have privilege as a older individual who's worked in the education system and worked in social work for over 35 years. And a lot of people take care of me, do a lot of the technical pieces for me. And my authority and my, let's say, power, privilege is way out of proportion. I'm one of the most privileged people at TSU, not the best paid, but walking into a room, I look like somebody important. I'm just like you with experiences.
Okay. Can you all? Okay. Can you see my screen? Can you all see my screen here?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
There we are in the middle.
Okay.
Can we make that larger?
Excuse me, Madhukar sir, and co-host Sophia Marasani ma'am. It's very difficult to get to the voice of Dr. J. Is there any technical problem?
So, Dr. J,
Yes.
do you think that your mic and everything is working fine?
Yes, I do have some outside noise here, but I can speak up.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Is that working?
For me, it's totally fine, but our teachers is having some problems, so we might have to ask them. Can you just speak some words? We have to do some testing here before we start.
Okay. I think the language barrier is going to be
Yeah,
a
it's
challenge.
fine. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay,
It's
okay,
fine.
it's fine now.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, Dr.
Okay.
Zay.
Can you enlarge this middle screen here where we've got the, there we go.
Let me just do this. Okay, let me hold on. Okay, how is this?
Could you move it a little to the left? Or I can do something here. No, that's the wrong button.
What do you want me to do?
Oh, let's do this. How's that? Like I said, I'm Dr. Hedgepeth, Tennessee State University. Our topic's teaching persuasive writing to high school students. Where my perspective and where my value in this presentation comes from as a peer reviewer, I determine who gets to present at our major conferences. Not just me, there's others who do also, but I'm one of the privileged few who get to decide who gets to present. I also help decide who gets to get published. And that's a lot of power. I mean, that's too much power, but it's not just me. There's many others who do it. But that perspective, with that authority, that gives me something to talk to you about how to teach persuasive writing to students. Now, can you flip the screen?
Okay. Can you see my screen, Dr. J?
I'm seeing a screen.
Okay.
See, that comes out in the middle.
Is that okay?
Okay, now drop down one. Maybe I should just go off my screen. Let's see. I've got it right here.
So we put your shadow in the front.
Okay. Now, in talking about persuasion and writing. You could think about it in terms
I
of
think it's
also,
possible to download the file and go to the slide mode if you don't mind.
yeah, I'd like that. Okay, so perspective, you want to think about it in terms of these students have been communicating verbally, not so much writing. And if you get them to think in the same terms of the way you write, the way you speak to impress people. For example, you'll want to get their attention. I call that a grabber. And what you need to do is to say something that will force people, almost force them to read your writing. We look at the first 3 sentences. If they're not engaged by then, you can very easily lose them, and the value of your paper is diminished. You want to say something that really pulls people in. For example, when I was talking about using the comparing speaking to writing, you will see tricks that you use in speaking. You use volume for emphasis, and a lot of times a softer voice is more emphasis. You'll want to grab somebody. An example might be 1 out of 10 high school students will die of XYZ disease by the age of 30. 1 in 10. You want to get something that'll grab them. And typically you'll say 1 in 10 high school students have XYZ disease, Smith 2020. And of those students, 50% will present with halitosis, with some disorder. But you want to get somebody engaged immediately within the 2 to 3 sentences. They're going to move on. And the typical structure of your writing will include an abstract, which is the last thing you've written. And there'll be a grabber in that also. There'll be a simple grabber, body, conclusion. So we found that if we gave the students hydroxychloride, that we saw a 60% improvement, whatever that is. But that is the body of your abstract that gets everybody's attention. And that is the last thing that you write when you're writing a paper. So are you guys seeing the PowerPoint at this point in time? No, I don't think so. Are you hearing me? There we go. So persuasive, well, we'll go all the way through it now. We're starting out, when I asked you about your opinions and what interests you, there's a reason for getting at the audiences and writing to the audience's desires. If you're writing for high school teachers, you want to know about high school teachers. If you're writing about women in social work, you'll want to find out what is important to the women in social work. That's motivation. What motivates them is more important than what they have to do. So the motivation is what's important to you. Now, Sophia, child welfare may be what's important to her. Now, her autonomous desire for that is she wants it herself, as opposed to suppose her parents want her to be a dentist. She's going to be more engaged and show much more determination and stick-to-itness. That motivation will drive you to higher levels. You're talking to your high school students, you might be talking about their football team or the current music. Now, I'm not going to be an expert in the current music, they are. But I would want to know enough to get to this autonomous motivation. I don't want them to succeed because I want to succeed. I want them to own that motivation. Decky and Ryan did a lot of research on autonomous, which is that internal motivation. That is the strongest tool I've got to engage the students. What do they want to persuade? Maybe they want to lower the drinking age. They want to lower the voting age. It's what they want. It's what you want as the writer. What they want as the writer. There'll be more effort put out and it'll last longer if it is autonomous from internal. So let's move forward thinking about what it is that we do. We need to get their attention. We need to grab her. Something 1 and 3. Now, when you're writing that, you don't want to exaggerate. You don't want any exclamation. Yes? What's that? Okay. We can do this specific thing. It will keep people from dying. Or you want to have some kind of consequence. You're starting out your paper, talking to your students. They want to lower the voting age to 17, let's say. They'll want to say something to them, the fact that having a lower voting age provides a safer country, whatever their attention is. They need to grab their audience's attention within the first 3 sentences. People will wander off and lose it. Peer reviewers will look at it, and their job is to read the whole thing, but if they're not engaged right off, read a little bit differently. And the important thing here, I'm talking about this grabber. You got to talk about success. You got to talk about achievement. You got to talk about the deliverable. If you do what this article is calling for, if you're taking this action, what will you see? For example, fewer people will die. We'll have a more responsive government. Whatever it is, we want to talk about that right up front. We've got a reason for you to listen to what I'm saying about this cause. You want this preferable outcome. So you want to talk to your students in terms of what is it exactly gets people's attention? What is it that we need to do? And what is it that drives us forward? And your audience, knowing your audience, will be a huge step in that direction. If they want something different than what you want, then you probably got the wrong audience or wrong topic, perhaps. Note that the tone and volume, both oral and print, are vital to persuading somebody. In speaking, we can use volume, and we can use volume. Lower volume could be just as important as higher volume, but we don't do that in writing. we don't want exclamation points. We don't want to, you know, the cap lock, right? We want it understated, but strongly enough so that the reader puts the emphasis that we intend to put there. When you get done with the first 2-3 paragraphs, you want that reader to be saying and following the emphasis, the meat, what you want them to own. You want them to come to it on their own and make it almost forcing their opinions. You talk about being a car salesman, right? You talk about being a teacher trying to engage the students. These are the same kind of things they need to think of when they're writing. Perhaps the young men in the high school class, you might think of it in terms of courting a young lady. You might think in terms of, well, if you talk to Susie about the concert next Saturday, she might be more impressed, or the concerts you've gone to in the past. That's the kind of thing that maybe a high school student might understand is related to selling. The selling, you know, they're selling them, I want to be able to vote at 17. I'm selling the young lady in the class that maybe she'll go to the concert with me next month. These are the same kind of things. But in writing, we can't say the same things we do orally. So we have to make those points clear. We have to drive their imagination. You'll say, yeah, 7 out of 10 teenagers will die of XYZ disease. Next paragraph will be 70% of them will have halitosis. Smith, 2020. 30% will have dental decay. Jones, 2020. So in saying that, you're telling them that Smith and Jones, I agree with them. Now you can also say the same thing and disagree with them. You say Jones's work on halitosis and XYZ disease is just not important at all because halitosis isn't that meaningful, whatever it is. But typically, you're agreeing with something. If you don't put that qualifier at the end or the next step, then you're kind of supporting Smith and Jones's impressions. You want to use valuable references, reliable references. Can you go to the next screen? So we were writing and we're doing research and we're thinking about, we have to think about these 4 types of research. I just talked on the last slide about needing these research and the references. What I was talking about there, 70% with halitosis from Jones. And that's probably out of a quantitative perspective, quantitative research project, meaning counting numbers, more about hard science. So when we talk about qualitative, that's more for what I call the harder sciences, social work, social science, where you get more of an idea of what the feeling is and what the impact is. And a lot of times you'll read research that's mixed methods, meaning quantitative and qualitative. More recently, we're getting at multiple methods. There's multiple qualitative methodologies that you can use. I find that stronger than most, but the strongest here is STEM, hard sciences, quantitative support for what you're saying. And on the next slide, we're moving to, oops, right place there. The perspectives that you can have in doing this top-down deductive. You start with the concept and then you build down, build your knowledge down. And in this is one word, inductive, from the bottom up. So you're getting the information from your students, let's say, about what they need to succeed, and you build up towards a more general deductive perspective. So these are the things that you'll have to explain to them, that you can use both of these, but typically you'll see somebody in your writing to persuade them. And grabbing their attention, maybe you want to start with the top down. A lot of the research, a lot of the work I do is the inductive, from the bottom up, so that I'm not imposing my opinion on someone. But when we're talking persuasive writing, we're probably talking top down. I'm trying to get this to drop one more. Here we go. So the most respected, like I was saying back there, that STEM is the most respected. But for me, the qualitative is what I think really moves people and get at that inner drive, autonomous drive. Now, another perspective in persuading somebody to agree with you is being in the in group, being inside with them. Now I'm in a group of students in a classroom. I'm the outsider. I'm definitely not one of them. Somebody inside that group, an insider, is going to be more influential to them. I know when my son was growing up, a pretty girl was very persuasive, and I couldn't hardly talk him out of the reality of anything but what, you know, the peer groups said. Insider and outside, there's a lot tied to that. You already have some kind of ownership and a common experience. So in this quote from Ragoff, communication between community insiders and outsiders is essential. It's not a matter of which perspective is correct. It's about what is understood. You have a common understanding as an insider. So back to what the most respected by outsiders, government, and funding is the STEM. I think that's overstated respect, but that's just my opinion. I ain't got no money. So that's probably a reason to not listen to me around this STEM and the humanity perspective as being the harder science. I find that it gives color, context, depth, and it can move people. The mixed and multiple methods is the way to go, I think. So, here we go. You're sitting down, you're telling your students how to sell their idea of being able to vote at age 17. Know the state of knowledge. That's your literature review. And find what's being said by the experts. You might find an expert who's saying that the youth fresh still in high school has more current knowledge. They may have, you know, different perspectives, but you want to have that knowledge. So you're talking to your students about doing the literature review, and the reason to do it isn't because it's required, it's because they need that knowledge to sell their proposal. If you want to persuade somebody in your writing, it's preferable to have 17-year-olds vote. You want to be able to say Smith and Jones 2019 and Jones and Smith 2017. You want to have current hard data. Now, sometimes I use a quote from 1938 because it's that important to what I'm saying. But most of your research should be recent. So you want to talk to your students about current thinkers. I mean, I could say Aristotle is credited with saying, but I better have something from the last, say, 8 years or so, not magic about 8, but, you know, current stuff's important. You might have to go back a little bit further to see where the current thinking is and what it was built on. I think there's going to be some discussion on that at the end of this. What are the commonly held beliefs? Critical review, do you agree? And now here I want to talk a little bit about critical thinking in high school students. You might find them already disagreeing, thinking critically, but if we talk to them about the classical critical thinking, the Habermas and the Frankfurt School, these other terms may not reach them, but it can be put into the context that they would know. Now I'm going to use the example of my son again. He would come up with whatever some pretty girl told him, and he'd hold on to that belief pretty strong. And it wasn't always wrong, because for him, he's living in a different reality than I am. He's got different friends, he's got different experiences. You have to be careful. The groupthink can go scary places. We look at having the students and the, I'm thinking here, teenage, can have very strongly held groupthink, like we talked about the insider and the outsider. And older people don't understand these kind of items. Now, we're talking about teaching them how to sell this concept, say, being able to vote at 17. What's that? Everybody okay here? So we used to use, in selling cars, we use this feel, felt, found. You might be able to reach your students that way. In the car lot, an example would be, maybe you can fit this person into the blue car because the price is right. They can afford it, and the payments be more reasonable. So what we would do is say, yeah, I really like blue cars, and I always bought blue cars, but I felt that I could only afford the black car. And I found that I had an extra $100 a month. Feel, felt, found. So you can use motivational tricks. If you want to say tricks, I think perhaps tools might be a better term. Find out what engages your students, your teenage students. We're talking about critical thinking, critical review. So we want them to be thinking. And we're being persuasive, but in this context, not only are we being persuasive, trying to get at their autonomous needs, their autonomous desires, we want to be using the same concepts with these individuals. Why do you think teenagers should vote at the age 17? I think for me, to start with, I'd probably be all defensive and saying, oh, they're too young, whatever. But with a good, intelligent, persuasive argument, a good, well-written paper, I think they might be able to persuade somebody. And the point here isn't that they're able to vote at 17, but they're able to think critically and they're able to persuade people to get things done. One of my experiences here in this persuasive writing back, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, we had a female vice presidential candidate who came to the National Federation of the Blind conference to give a presentation, and we had a policy statement that we wanted her to take to Washington, D.C. We wanted to change the language, the way the government thought about blind individuals. This was a National Federation of the Blind, not for the blind. So we wanted to change the words in our disability resources within the government from the disabled to the disabled and the blind, so that we weren't associated with being disabled or differently able. And by the way, I had like 2,000 volunteer lawyers that are blind that were kind of helped make my case. But we gave them a simple, a very simple 5-page presentation. I was on that committee, and they gave me this big thick book of whereas, therefores, and I'm sure that the vice presidential candidate knew all the wherefores and therefores and everything else. But I convinced them to just boil it down. We had maybe less than 5 pages of why we felt that the blind people should be proud that they're people and not be considered less than. And I don't know that we convinced her, but we did convince her that she had plenty of votes in that hall. So within, I'm gonna say 10 days, everybody in the White House, everybody in Congress had changed the wording on their proposals from the disabled to the disabled and the blind. We simplified it. And I don't know, I like to think that my presentation to Geraldine Ferrero, the vice presidential candidate at the time, that made a difference. But it may have just been that there's a whole lot of us in that room and she saw a lot of votes. I don't know. The thing is, I knew to simplify and say, this is why we want it. She didn't have time to read no 500-page dissertation on it. She was in to speak to us, and then probably in the afternoon, she's talking to a group of individuals with hearing challenges, and then, you know, a group of women interested in women's rights. And so we boiled it down. We gave her a clear, concise image of where we're going. And even though there's the power of those therefores and whereases in their proposals, we just made a common sense connection that worked. So let's go on to the next slide. And do we have any questions at this point in time? Feel free to interject and ask a question. Okay. Persuasive writing. Make your case in language that audience will understand. Use quality resources, .org, .edu. .com can be very tricky. We don't want to get into somebody selling their idea while I'm selling my idea. There's more prestige in a .org or a .edu. And this leads to a common, probably in high school, you probably see Wikipedia cited. Whether it's a good site or not, Wikipedia doesn't have the image. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is a state of the art. It can be, but citing a Wikipedia.com is not going to impress people as much as going to the original source. There's people that can rewrite what's on a Wikipedia page, and they may not be the ultimate sources that you want, and there may not be an ultimate source. But if you go to that source, you'll get a better understanding and you'll look better. And looking better in writing is a good thing. Agreeing with people, the Jones 2020, the Smith 2018, you want to be in their circle, you want to be accepted by them. And besides, they might cite you, and you cite them. That's a big piece of what we do at our level. But what the students need to know is they're citing people that they want to agree with, and they want to agree with people that are well respected. They want to agree with people that other people, the people it's trying to persuade the other voters that 17-year-olds can and should vote. They want to use reliable sources. That's what's going to be persuasive. Sophie, can you change the slides again? Now, being persuasive, you gotta be honest, you have to have integrity, common sense. Here's some of the common errors. This first one is the most frequent in my peer reviewing. Misrepresenting research, both the authors and their references. If you give an incomplete information and you're citing that in your work, people find out. And it's not going to influence, as a matter of fact, it's going to turn people against your cause. Maybe unjustly, but you have lost that authoritative emphasis. So you need to explain to them that misrepresentations will hurt worse and it won't get published. We'll figure it out. The context is left out. You say 90% of the students interviewed were not able to understand the levels of government. Now, what could be left out of that context is age. Okay, let's say these students are 7 years old. Well, of course, they're not going to know it. Maybe where they come from, that whole governmental power or experience isn't in their context, isn't something they know about. That's when we talk about cultural sensitivity, validity, reliability. You may not be teaching heavily into that with these high school students. I don't know how deep you get into validity and reliability, but does it make sense? Does your research make sense? And if you're citing bad research, right? So you're going to reach them with examples they understand, not to misrepresent research. Overstating your case. That'll get you thrown out in a hurry. I had a group, I think they were out of the Northwest, that did a great study. But in their writing, they said 3 different places, this is the greatest program ever. And you'll hear that from people like Donald Trump. And I said, well, if that research had a control group, maybe we could say this is good. But we don't know if we gave the participants a lollipop and got better results than spending this $1 billion on your project, overstating your case. So I gave them another chance, and they sent it back to me, and they moved their overstated statement further down in the paper, where it just instead of 3 times, it said 1 time, this is the greatest program that's ever existed. Well, guess what? They didn't get published. You may think that you've got the greatest thing, but you want the reader to say it's the greatest thing. And you want to have the background, you want to have the context, you want the students to understand that if you want to vote at 17 years old, you better come up with valid, reliable representations and reasons, and don't overstate your case. Next slide. This is work from Dr. Caldine from Arizona State University. Again, it goes back at that salesmanship stuff. These are tricks that you can teach the students to use. You know, you're looking at this example that Sophie's added in here, the steps you're building to respectability. These are the principles of persuasion, reciprocity. If I give you my apple from lunch today, maybe tomorrow you'll give me the banana out of your lunch. We're give and take. And that builds a bond, and that builds an influence. Notice we're changing from persuasion to influence, but that's what you're doing in persuading somebody's influence. So you give examples of what that means. You want to be consistent and committed. Somebody's going to believe you, like, say, Bernie Sanders, a politician in America. Says the same thing for 30 years. Then that's somebody you can depend that tomorrow you're going to say that same thing again. That consistency influences people. At least they know who you are and where you're coming from. Social proof. That might be harder to understand. If your friends like this band, or if your friends want to vote at 17, and the discussions that go on within that social context reinforces what you're trying to sell, what you're trying to influence, what persuasion you're exerting is reinforced by those within that circle. Another thing that influences people, and I talk about this a lot because I am way overprivileged. I have way too much authority. Racism exists, and I am privileged, a white male, older. I had a cousin once told me an authority is somebody from out of town with a briefcase. Frequently, it has nothing to do with your real authority, your real capacity. Okay. So should I continue? Is everybody on track here? Got any questions?
No questions, sir. It's all right, sir.
Okay, now I just want to talk about things not to say. This is you're teaching the students what not to say here. Never say research has found. Research usually indicates. And after you're done with research, the next time you do the research, the variables will change, and that research hasn't really found anything. We say that research indicates. There could be flaws in the research. There could be a Katrina, some kind of natural disaster that impacts the results of your study. There's too many variables. And particularly naive high school students, you might have a tendency to think that's a caveat for everything. Research has found that 17-year-olds can vote, and then you move on to your next topic. If you're going to say anything about this research support, you're going to say Jones 2020, Smith 2018. You're going to cite reliable sources, not just research is found as a general vague idea. So you want to stop, get the students' attention, and get at what you're saying here. Don't cut corners. Research is found will get your paper thrown out. You can still say it, but I don't like it. And if you don't have it backed up by somebody else, you're going to go in the trash can, not get published. They're not going to get to be able to vote at 17 if their persuasive writing doesn't go any further. Expert state, again, without saying who, what, where, when, it means nothing. It's just a statement out there. It's a politician. You want to vote at the age 17. You're going to get some experts on your side. You can say who they are and what circumstances. That's saying this is exciting. No, you want the reader to add the excitement. You tell an exciting story. And you can reach the students in discussion with these topics here pretty easily. We have a president that loves superlatives. Everything he does is the greatest ever. And the world stopped to watch him cough or really stupid things. And after a while, everything is the greatest. And when you emphasize everything, you're really emphasizing nothing because everything's common and the same. So, and people will believe their facts. I'm sure I do in a lot of cases. And I'll think they're indisputable, but there's little or nothing that can't be disputed. Things can change, research and perspectives. It's just, yes, you must support what you have to say. And I could see this as being a whole discussion on these things of what not to do. Because the shortcuts here were just doing somebody's argument.
Hello?
Sophia,
Yeah, okay.
यो जेको म्युट भयो एकचोटि हेरौँ त
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. I think we're almost done here. Let's go on to the next slide here. We only got a couple more to go here.
Okay.
पर्सुएसिभ राइटिङ हो के
What's that?
पर्सुएसिभ राइटिङ भन्ने छ राइटिङ स्किल हो के
Dr. J, it's all right, sir.
What's that?
It's all right, Dr. J. You can proceed.
Okay.
Okay.
This is the same stuff we've already talked about. I'm talking to these teenagers and the high school students. You're gonna want to come up with this. At the end, you're gonna reiterate some of the important things that's important to you or the errors you see in their writing around these tips. Typically, what I'll do with students is I'll have them turn in a paper and I'll turn it back with what I call a review and resubmit, rewrite and resubmit. It's very useful for them to get an idea of where they're going and where they went wrong. My students get upset because there's a lot of red corrections in what they've done. But that's actually a good thing. That means they're trying, and that means that they're learning. There's a whole lot of learning in that red. And if you get rid of that red, you get an A, which is the big carrot you hang out in front of them. So you use empirical evidence. You know your audience. You gently sell yourself and your perspective. You don't say this is the greatest thing ever, but you want respect. No superlatives. Use techniques from the influence at work. I think we got one more slide. When I started writing, I used guides from my topics. Yours may be very different. Might be educational books primarily. But I had a book called Nuts and Bolts from the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. I found it very useful when I started writing. I found writing with style, APA style, made easy. You may not be writing in APA style. They may be writing in Chicago style or something else. But that's an example of what you need. So I want you all to feel free to discuss or question anything here. So is there another slide here too? I think we're about done. Another little bit of tip here. Proofreading's vital. Even have somebody else read it. You notice in your writing, I'll find a sentence ends and done, the next sentence begins with not sentence, the next line begins with so rather than read out line to you, you want to make sure you made your point. You don't want people to go all the way through and you don't go through all the process and you didn't do it right. Nobody's mind was changed. And I think this is an autocorrect error here. I'm thinking, are you, I'm thinking autonomous is what we're trying to achieve here. And did you get their attention? Again, in review, you got to grab somebody up front. You got to tell them what your hopeful outcome is. But if you don't get their attention, they're not going to get to that fourth, fifth sentence. They're not going to get to that third paragraph. You have to grab their attention. Same thing with the students in the classroom. You have to grab their attention. You have to talk to them. And I gave Sophia an APA, American Psychological Association. That's the style that social workers in America use. With some really good advice on it and what people look at. So maybe we can go back to the classroom perspective here and see what questions we've got or what we can do to make this happen. We'll talk about our assignment for next week. Does everybody understand what we've just went over? It looks like I lost a lot of people. Okay, well, if anybody's still listening here, it looks like we've dropped a few people, quite a few. I would like you to write maybe as much as 2 pages. I know my PowerPoint says a paragraph, but give me an example of the point you want to make, how you want to persuade someone to read your paper, or how your students what you want your students' papers to look like. and submit them to me by Tuesday. And I'll look at them. I'll give you pointers to make your writing, your efforts meaningful so that you get that desired result. The point of going through all this and not getting the desired result is just a terrible waste of time. So I'd like, say, by Tuesday, for you all to email me a sample of your writing so that we can do that, revise and resubmit, so that we have a clearer understanding of what's going on. It is so important that we reach these students and so that they can achieve their autonomous goals. And maybe my perspectives are too clinical to peer review elitist, but I think it helps students to understand how to influence people. And if you have a chance, I'd like you to look at that APA article that we included here and send me something on influence, on persuasion. And I have certificates. I'll have certificates for the people who come back next our next meeting. Do we have any input from the crowd?
Yeah, DB sir. DB sir. DB sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Better to into the discussion series. Let's discuss about what we did today's session. And here is Dr. J. I think we'll have live discussion with him. Then we'll understand more about the persuasive writing.
Yeah.
I would like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So ask our teachers to ask him. Yes, sir, ma'ams. Any questions to Dr. J regarding persuasive writing?
What would you like to know?
Okay. Madhu sir, can I?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So thank you so much, Dr. Zeb. Actually, your presentation was really informative and lots of tips. And I've noted some acronyms like PRAP and so on. So very informative and very useful presentation. Thank you so much for that. And I'd also like to get some more ideas on the literature, any book or any article, which, if there is any sort of listing of some kind of phrases or the sentence starter at the starting of a paragraph or somewhere, is there any sort of list that what phrases are generally used in persuasive writing? Is there any literature, any book or any reference?
I see you're saying like examples of what you'd like to see that grabs somebody's. I've got some articles I can send out.
Okay, so I'd love to read them. So if you can send, yeah, sure.
I could do that. I think that'd make a lot of sense. And the anachronisms, I know I used APA, American Psychiatric Association, which is a ruling body. CSWE, Council of Social Work Education. I can't think of any offhand, but if there's some that you want me to explain, I should have explained. I should have had more detail on that. Go ahead. What do we got here?
डालबन लेगा जी sir.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so
Yeah.
I'll send out some examples of an article that grabs your attention. It wouldn't necessarily be the whole article that you're going to pay attention to. The important thing is getting that buy-in in the first 3 or 4 sentences, that grabber, and then being honest and being productive and citing valid, reliable information. The key, I think, particularly with youth, teenagers, high school, is getting the buy-in and why. And that's why I try to reach out to understand that autonomous desire. I try to reach for something that will bind them to the project, a reason to do it. Not because they need a grade, but because they want to vote when they're 17, whatever that is. I think my language here is not as good as it should be. If I spoke in Nepalese, Hindi, I think we'd have a better result here. But feel free to let me know constructively what you think. And just because I have this authority to impose these American thoughts, these American ways of doing things, American and Canadian research, doesn't mean I'm right. It does mean I understand this American peer review world. Any other comments?
Okay. DV sir.
Yes.
If we don't have any questions, then we are in the end of the session.
Okay. I was going to
ask a question?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes, Shamlal sir, please. Any question?
Which pronoun, first person I, we, or second person you, and third person they, he, she, which pronoun is more possessive? Possessive writing, which pronouns we should prefer?
When I was younger, we always used he as the generic pronoun, and now we're finding that's not as acceptable. It's okay to say she, but I was taught that he means she, them, they. The he was the generic term, but now with the changing way of thinking about things is that that is sort of male dominant, male image, a privilege that we've had for years. Our psychology research was taught with male college students, white predominantly. So what I was taught is not acceptable now. So we want to use a lot of times social workers use a different kind of, I'm trying to think of a technical term, but the non-specific, one can, you are, and maybe you want to use she just to balance out the budget to make people interested or whatever. Who your audience is. It used to be a lot simpler when we were younger. And I understand the driving forces that move us away from that generic he, him. Does that answer your question?
What about using first person pronoun? First person pronoun or second person?
Oh. In social work in particular, we use, rather than a pronoun, we'll use the social worker, the author, those kind of terms, professional terms, the author's aunt, the social worker's mother, those kind of things. We turn it into the context of the writer. Does that make sense? I don't think I'm understanding, maybe. They and them are pretty safe.
Okay. DB sir? I think if DB sir? DB sir?
Did you say?
Madhukar sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir. And I think if we don't have question,
I think
That's about it. I said perhaps the language barrier or some other
Yeah.
issue that maybe I spoke too fast. I don't know. But anyhow, if you got questions, I want you to say. Okay. I want you to be able to better teach your students.
respected teachers, any questions to Dr. J? If you have, please ask.
Navin sir.
Navin Varasini sir.
Yeah, he might have a question, I think.
Yeah, it was very good session. Thanks for the professor enlightening us regarding the persuasive writing. I don't have such questions to ask now. It's fine.
Thank you, Navin sir.
Balkrishna sir might be there. Do you have any question, Balkrishna sir?
Well, at the bottom of that slide presentation, I've got my email address. Feel free to contact me and I can give you my phone number, whatever I can do to help. I've been working with Sophie's article, and I hope to be doing some other research with some of you here.
DB sir? Yeah, Home Raj Kharka sir might have a question.
Home Raj sir.
Thank you, Jay, for your nice presentation. But actually, what strategy are applicable to develop persuasive writing in our higher secondary level in Nepali context? Because this program is extremely focused on higher secondary school education for writing. We have essay writing in our examination. In essay writing, what strategy can be developed? What essay can be included in writing process that learners can convince to other person to agree on their perspective and then opinion? What do you have any strategy, sir? Please.
Okay. When we think in terms of sending in a letter of recommendation or recommending yourself. We have a great, huge, comprehensive exam.
Yeah.
And it'll be a 6-hour project for the student to complete the exam. When I did it, it was 2 6-hour days. A lot of what these basic things that I talked about today are the things that will turn the reviewer, the grader, off and say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. And maybe I don't know what you're talking about, and the writer doesn't know what he's talking about, but we're not going to get anywhere unless they follow these simple rules. Now, in writing these recommendations and these references, those kind of things, I always try to key in on, as social workers, we talk about communication skills, and you're selling the person you're recommending, or you're writing the referral for. And so the individuals that are writing their own recommendations or their letters that go along with their applications to college, those kind of things, they need to proofread it and they need to sell themselves. They need help. They need to go to, like I said, those 2 books that I had. You're going to have books on these exams you talk about. We have study guides for getting our LMSW, our licensed bachelor's degrees, these big exams. We have online programs, and somebody makes me doing it. There's some free online help on those kind of things. These journals that you're talking about, I don't really understand. Not journals, these documents you're talking about, and the writing and the influence in those. I don't know those, what that looks like, what the rules are there. I'd be glad to look at it if somebody wants to send it to me.
Okay, thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Jay, for your very informative information and to us, and then I hope it will be very useful for impressive for learners to develop their writing skills and then to competent in field of writing. So thanks a lot for your very valuable time in this great platform, and so happy and delighted to get to touch with you in this regard. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for
Amraj sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, thank you,
Namaste.
Jay.
Mhm.
Amraj sir, thank you for asking questions. Yes, we are at the end of this session or presentation. Thank you all the valued participants in the district and out of the districts. We are very glad we have the presentation by Dr. Jay today. We are very much grateful to Dr. Jay and to managing such great sessions. I'd like to thank Madhukarji for the cooperation, for the collaborations, for all these things. Thank you, everybody. Now I'd like to request Mr. Krishna Prasad Marasini, the chairperson of Nepal English Language Teachers Association's Gulmi branch, to express the words of gratitude to Jay and his team. Mr. Krishna Marasini sir, over to you. Krishna sir. Krishna Marasini sir. Krishna Marasini sir.
There is Basudev sir, I think. Vasudev Gimire, sir.
Vasudev, sir?
Yes,
Vasudev,
sir.
sir?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
Okay. I'd like to request Mr. Vasudev Gimire to express the words of gratitude to Dr. Jay and his team. Over to you, Vasudev, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Divisor. Namaste, everybody. So, in this program, so I would like to thank Dr. Jay Edpath for his valuable time. His presentation was wonderful, and we enjoyed his sessions. It was very informative and very useful. So being in late night, and he stayed for us, and I would like to thank from the on the behalf of Gulmi Nelta. I would like to thank Mr. I would like to thank Dr. Jay and Miss Sophia, and we are equally gratitude to Madhukar sir for coordinating all this, and those who are participating this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for having me. I really look forward to collaborating with these individuals, and please contact me individually. Probably take a nap after this and get up in the morning and send out some examples of how somebody can get your attention at the beginning.
Madhu, sir?
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to share anything?
Divi, sir?
Yes. Madhu, sir, could you conclude today's presentation?
Yeah. Thank you very much, all of you, and especially Dr. Jay and Shofia. In next session, we'll present here with our assignment. Thank you very much, Dr. Jay, and we'll be in touch with you, and we would like to appreciate your ideas and the concept. Thank you once again. Thank you very much. Sophia? Sophia?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Would you like to say something else?
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. J, again for your valuable time, and thank you. And yeah, we really appreciate your interest. That means a lot. And also, we would love to have your contribution, in coming days. And thank you, all the teachers, and hope to have this kind of session with you all. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Good night.
Okay.